Good morning and welcome back to the Witch of Bees and Bones. It's early morning here. It's dreary. It's rainy. It snowed yesterday and now there's just rain on top of it. And I've been thinking a lot about the cycle of seasons. And as I've discussed in other videos, I consider myself to be a death positive person, and therefore this is a death positive channel. And in the last few days, I've had multiple conversations with several friends and loved ones about death and dying and how it's such a taboo in our culture. And though this was on my list to discuss on the channel, it was a couple rungs down, but I decided to bring it to the top because, again, the Weaver's Oracle reminded me again about the importance of crone energy. And crone energy is towards the end of life. And granted, there can be a big chunk of time before that, but I'm a person who spends a lot of time saying I think about death a lot is very morbid, and I don't mean for it that way. I do not have suicidal ideations. I do not wish to die. But I will be honest, dying is about the last thing on the list that I'm worried about because, spoiler alert, I know it's going to happen. And I wish that in our society we could discuss it more openly. And I think that if we were able to discuss it more openly and have an open dialogue from the jump, that we would all be a little more comfortable with the death of loved ones and our own dying process. So a little background on me. As I've said in other videos, I've worked in the industry of hospice as well as a few other things. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. I no longer practice, but I spent a big chunk of time doing HIV and AIDS education and being a therapist for folks that were terminally ill. Now, this was back in the 90s, and people were dying of AIDS instead of living with HIV. So these are very different times, and I lost a lot of clients. And I by no means want to say that if we're more comfortable with death, that we won't grieve, that it won't break our hearts when we lose someone, because I promise you it will. But I think that we will be able to move through and with and along grief a lot easier if we had some tools to do so. So as I mentioned, my friend the Weaver's Oracle, she reminded me again, a few days ago I pulled this card and I wanted to share her with you. This is Owl, Ancestor of the Cold Earth Home. Sorry for the glare, guys. So her subtitle is She Shatters the Grave Pots. This is a heavy card. It's also a really beautiful card. It's a card that reminds us to mourn the dead and release them into the afterlife, and for us to return to the living. And I know that sometimes when we lose someone, that kind of like going on living is, it's not that we don't want to be alive, it's that living seems really hard and sometimes too difficult. And again, if we could have a more open dialogue about death and dying and that process, there would be fewer scared people that were dying, and I think people would be able to mourn and grieve more holistically. There's this beautiful statement that I'm going to share with you, and again, I will link this deck in the bio. I mean, in the notes below. She sang the dead into the heart of the land, and she sang the people back to the bright morning. So we never forget the people that we've lost. It's not, people have this idea that you kind of like get over someone dying. You don't. You don't. You always miss them. But if we could shift our perspective slightly and think about it's all part of the process, that right now in New England it's winter. It's the dying season. It's the cold season. It's the season of death on the wheel. And it's snowy and it's icy and it's cold and things are not growing because things need a time to rest. Things need to pass to make room for the living to expand. We sort of understand this about nature, but when it comes to personal loss, it's harder to understand and it's harder to process. And I'm the first person to admit that. My dad has been gone over 10 years now, and I miss him every single day. I will say that at the end of his life, he had Alzheimer's, and it was tragic and it was brutal. And I have seen a lot of death and I've seen a lot of people dying in a lot of different ways. And to see somebody robbed of their memory and their faculties is among the most brutal, in my opinion. I cannot wish him here. I cannot wish he was here just to make me more comfortable. I have to, in my mind, for myself, and I'm not telling anyone else what to do or how to grieve. I will hold space for grieving. I will not tell someone how to grieve. But for myself, when I get really sad and hurt that he's gone, instead of focusing on the loss, I focus instead on the life. And that's not to say that I don't acknowledge the loss, that I don't acknowledge how hard it was to watch someone you love deteriorate. But it's not the whole package. It's the very, very end of things. And for me, it's important to remember that. I had so much life with my dad and I learned so much, and there was so much teaching and learning and understanding and fun and hard times and the meat of what relationships look like. And the end sucked. It was tragic. It was horrible. It was awful. His actual passing was very peaceful, but Alzheimer's is ugly. But that's just the end part, and I don't want to lose sight of the importance of the beginning part and of the whole cycle of things. My dad didn't want to live that way. He didn't want to still be alive, and I have to respect that and understand that. And at this point, he'd be in his 90s, and I know that he really wanted no part of that for himself. I think my father was way more comfortable with dying than a lot of people were with him dying. And I think he taught me, again, in his own way, to make peace with that. So I made my funeral plans when I was 18 years old. And some of you are probably thinking, wow, that is really young. And it is. That's true. It is. I also know people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s that have made no plans. And again, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we're all going to die. And I wanted things to be on my terms for what my burial and what my funeral will look like. Because even at the green age of 18, I had seen funerals that did not reflect the person that had passed. And I found that really distasteful. I also realize it's hard for people, and they're just trying to do the best they can for their loved one that's passed. And sometimes we don't get the time ahead of time to know that's what's happening, and there's a tragic accident or there's a heart attack. And so we don't get the time to ask them. But if instead of being asked, if we can take the time to tell our loved ones or to explain it or to write it out and to start conversations, and I'm not saying like right out of the gate, like, boom, this is what's happening, but like little conversations, and think about what would I want my burial to look like? I don't want to be in a casket. I want a green burial. Um, Honestly, I would prefer to be left in the woods and scavenged upon, but that's both illegal and frowned upon. But I really would. I would prefer that. I would rather give sustenance back to animals because they mean so much to me. And I have a soft spot for scavengers. So I wish I could do that, but I cannot. So instead, I'm going to be buried in a shroud in the ground, and I will give back to the earth that way. That's not for everyone. Maybe you want to be cremated. Maybe you want aquamation. Maybe, and a lot of states have just legalized human composting, which is fascinating. Some people want to be, buried with the, beautiful coffin and all of that. Like, do you, like, get it? Whatever you want to do is what you get to do. But you can make that choice for yourself and therefore take some of the stress off of your loved ones. So I made those plans when I was 18 as my family sat down to make their own plans. And my parents said to me, hey, is this something you want to do? You can always change it later. You can do whatever you want to do. But if you want to do it now, and I was like, fuck yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And it wasn't sad and it wasn't hard and it wasn't stressful. And the beauty of it is, it was my grandmother, my father, and my mother and myself making plans all at the same time with one of our local funeral directors. And first, my grandmother died, and we knew exactly what she wanted, had it all paid for and taken care of. We didn't have to make any decisions. And then my father died, and we knew exactly what he wanted, and it was all taken care of, and there were no decisions to be made. And then my mom passed away, and the same thing. And when you're so entrenched in grief, it's really hard to make even the simplest of decisions. So I would welcome you, even if you're not ready to have the conversation with family and friends yet. Think about what you want. Think about what you want your burial to look like, or or cremation, or what you would like done with your remains, and just start there. You can ease into it. I know that this is a big step for a lot of folks, but as a person who is both a witch and a bone witch, who spends a lot of time in the woods, who's seen a great deal of death, it is inevitable. And I really feel that if we could become more comfortable with death and dying, we can grieve more holistically, and we can help others during those times as well. Thank you again for joining me today. I know this was a very heavy topic, and I would like to use it as a jumping off point. And I would love to hear any questions or comments in the comments below. I do answer all of them. I respond. So if you have something to say, please say it. Keep it kind and respectful. And I am, again, fully aware that this is a difficult topic, and I do not take it lightly. And I hope that that definitely comes across. So thank you all, and have a beautiful day. And find something beautiful that matters to you. And I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.